Hello, for demonstration purposes I have spawned the character outside of the boss room, however I will go back to show other areas of the level later on. Originally the game was going to incorporate a top-down camera angle, although I decided to change this throughout the build process to a third-person view. I made this decision because it enabled the player more control over the combat system, which is the main focus of this level. Through changing the camera I was also able to implement both the block system and a dodge system, which worked in whichever direction key the player was pressing. I'll talk more about this during the combat. The combat system I have created uses a combo mechanic to chain together attacks using both left and right mouse clicks. These are basic and smash attacks. The player also has a great sword mode, as you can see here. While in this mode the player moves a lot slower and also cannot block but deals a lot more damage. This mode can be switched in and out at any time using the R key. The player has energy alongside the health. This comes into play with the blocking and dodging skills, as it would drain while performing either of these actions. So the player couldn't abuse the blocking, it is set to disable once the bar reaches 0. The energy only recharges when the player isn't performing any combat action, as you can see here. The player also has two ultimate skills which are implemented alongside the limit break bar. Both the sword and shield mode and the great sword mode have one each. I've enabled a key to fill the limit break bar to show these off. Usually the bar would only fill when the player deals or receives damage. The sword and shield mode lasts for 15 seconds and deals continuous damage to any enemy within its vicinity. It isn't as damaging as the great sword mode, however, which deals one large burst of damage. There are two different enemy types in the game alongside the boss, a melee and a range variant. Each of these are considerably weaker than the boss but can be dangerous in swarms. I will show these off later on. The boss incorporates both the melee and ranged attacks depending on the player distance from the boss. He also has some special moves, the first being a slow debuff which will allow him to catch up to the character. His second one is a damage over time, where he sets fire to the player. Finally, he has his own ultimate ability which activates once he reaches below 30% health. I'll show this one now. As you can see, the boss also glows red for a split second when he receives damage. This is just an indicator for the player. The particle effects you can see happening are to show when the player is being hit from the boss. There is also one for blocking, which is in a different colour, as you can see here. The block will also drain the player's energy, but will disable when it gets to 0. This is the boss's ultimate ability. He will jump around the room, randomly kicking. It does a lot of damage and is hard to get away from, as you can see. I also added a lock-on system for the boss which allows the player to aim the camera at it. This can be toggled on and off using the tab key. The enemies and boss use a nav mesh to allow the AI to move, so all the enemies wouldn't trigger at once. They are set to initialize with the box trigger once the player enters. This also allows the player to have safe spots in corridors, and as the enemies can't leave their specified areas. This makes it so the player has to go through it and not be able to lead all the mobs to a far corner of the map and leave them there as well. Upon killing a basic enemy, it will display death animation and remain in the level for a few seconds before being destroyed. This was so certain rooms wouldn't fill up and become filled with collision. I'll show this off now. I'll now walk around the level and just show off a few of the rooms that are filled with mobs and how the player can interact with them. As you'll have also heard by now, there are sounds that I have implemented to certain attacks. These are so the player can know when things are happening, much easier than just being able to see them in case they aren't looking onto the boss at the same time. There is currently a bug where the boss will stay active even once you leave the area, die or reset. I'm looking into this and will hopefully have a troubleshoot for it as soon as I figure it out. This is an example of art for the level. It is textured using Quixel Suite and I will keep this theme throughout the level. It is currently rendered in Marmoset, however once it is placed into the engine, I plan to isolate the floating text and use a panner node to simulate the effect of it moving. I'll also be adding particle effects to the candles so they appear lit. The overall aesthetic I am hoping to achieve will feature a very dark theme with stones, metals, moss and water being some of the main textures. As you can see in this, I have also added some basic lighting to show the contrast I hope to achieve, where the lighting looks very warm against the dark materials. The sounds I have begun to implement follow along to this theme. I'm hoping to have some unique ones created by a friend who is a music student. I have also put together a mood board using Pinterest. I have provided this link to this in the link document.